My wife saw the word single beneath my name and commented beneath it in less than a minute. Since when? That was all. No anger. No accusation. No private message asking what I meant. Just 3 words, publicly posted beneath a status she had apparently never imagined I would change. I stared at her comment for a long time. Then I looked across our bedroom at the framed photograph from our wedding day. She was smiling in that picture. I was smiling too. Back then, I still believed that if 2 people loved each other enough, they could survive anything. I typed a reply. Since the day I realized I was the only one still married. Then I deleted it. I had spent 3 years explaining myself to my wife. I was tired of explaining. My name is Adrian Cole, and for most of our marriage, people assumed I had the easier life. My wife, Elena, was the CEO of Veilcrest Technologies, a company she had built from a small software firm into a major regional business. She was brilliant, disciplined, intimidating, and almost impossible to impress. And I was the husband standing quietly behind her. People often called me lucky. They didn't know that before Elena became a CEO, I had been the person who believed in her when almost nobody else did. I remembered the night she first showed me her business plan. We were sitting in a cheap apartment with the heater broken and instant noodles between us. I know it sounds crazy, she had said. It sounds expensive, I replied. She laughed. You're supposed to tell me it's brilliant. I'll tell you when it is. She threw a cushion at me. I caught it and smiled. Fine, I said. It's brilliant. Now let's figure out how you're going to pay for it. That was how we had started. I gave up a promotion because her company needed someone to handle operations. I used my savings to cover the first payroll when an investor delayed funding. I spent nights fixing contracts, organizing suppliers, and building internal systems while Elena focused on investors and clients. I never complained, because when she succeeded, I felt like I had succeeded too. Then everything changed. It started with a man named Marcus Vane. Marcus was one of Veilcrest's biggest investors. He was charming, wealthy, and constantly around Elena. At first, I didn't care. Then I noticed something. Whenever Marcus entered a room, Elena's expression changed. She became warmer, more attentive. Once, during a company dinner, I watched Marcus lean toward her and whisper something. She laughed. I couldn't remember the last time I had made her laugh like that. When we got home, I asked casually, "You seem close to Marcus." Elena removed her earrings. "He's an important investor." "I know. Then what's the problem?" "There isn't one." She looked at me for several seconds. "Adrian, don't become insecure." That word stayed with me. Not husband. Not partner. Insecure. I swallowed the question I really wanted to ask. A week later, Elena told me she wanted Marcus to become the chairman of a new strategic division. I disagreed. The numbers didn't make sense. His proposal puts too much control in his hands, I said. Elena didn't even look up from her laptop. I've already decided. But if the division fails, it won't. You haven't reviewed the risk projections. I don't need you to approve every decision I make. I went silent. That was the first time I realized something had changed. Not in the company. Between us. And I had no idea how far it had already gone. 3 weeks later, Elena asked me to leave the company. She said it gently. That somehow made it worse. "You've done enough," she told me. I stared at her from across her office. "Enough. You've been handling operations for years. I think it's time you pursue something of your own." I almost laughed. "Is this your way of firing your husband?" Her expression tightened. "This isn't personal. Everything between us is personal." She looked away. That was when I understood. She had already made the decision, and Marcus had probably helped her make it. I packed my things the next morning. Nobody stopped me. The employees who had once asked for my advice barely looked at me. By Friday, Marcus was sitting in the office that had been mine. He sent me a polite message. "Hope there are no hard feelings. Elena thinks this restructuring is best for everyone." I read it twice. Then I put my phone away. That night, Elena came home late. I had dinner waiting. She barely touched it. "Adrian, don't make this harder than it needs to be." I didn't say anything. "You've been quiet all week. I thought that's what you wanted." She sighed. "I need space." I nodded. "Okay." She looked almost surprised. "You're not going to argue?" "No." "Why?" I looked at her. "Because I finally understand that arguing doesn't make someone choose you." She didn't answer. Instead, she went upstairs. I remained at the table alone. That night, I opened an old storage box. Inside was the first notebook I had ever used for Veilcrest. I turned through the pages. There were supply forecasts, employee schedules, financial models, and handwritten ideas. Then I found something I had completely forgotten. A diagram. 3 years earlier, before Veilcrest had become successful, I had designed a logistics platform that could predict equipment demand using regional purchasing patterns. I had abandoned the project because Elena needed me to focus on the company. I stared at those pages until sunrise. For the first time in years, I wondered what might happen if I built something for myself. But before I could begin, Elena gave me the final reason to leave. The next evening, I walked into the house and found her sitting with Marcus. He was holding a folder. My folder. The one containing my old logistics designs. I stopped in the doorway. Marcus looked uncomfortable. Elena stood. Adrian, let me explain. I looked at the papers. You took my work. No, she said quickly. We're considering using the concept for Veilcrest. Considering? Marcus interrupted softly. The company can commercialize it. You'd receive compensation. I looked at Elena. You didn't even ask me. She hesitated. Then she said the sentence that finally broke something inside me. Because I knew you'd make it emotional. For years, I had protected her dreams. That night, I finally protected my own. I walked upstairs, packed one suitcase, placed my wedding ring on the dresser, and left without saying goodbye. Elena didn't follow me. I think she believed I would come back. For 3 years, I always had. This time, I didn't. The first morning after I left, I woke up in a hotel room that smelled like detergent and stale air. For a few seconds, I forgot where I was. Then I saw the empty space beside me. There was no Elena. No glass wall overlooking the city. No expensive alarm clock. No quiet footsteps moving around the bedroom before sunrise. Just silence. I expected to feel free. Instead, I felt hollow. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my left hand. My wedding ring was gone. For 3 years, I had worn it so naturally that its absence felt strange. My phone buzzed. Elena. I didn't answer. A minute later, she sent a message. Where are you? I stared at it. Then another. We need to talk. I turned the phone face down. That was the first boundary I had ever placed between us. It felt cruel. It also felt necessary. I spent the next 2 weeks in a small rented apartment across town. It wasn't impressive. The kitchen was barely large enough for one person, the heating rattled at night, and the bedroom window faced a brick wall. But nobody could walk through that door and tell me what I was allowed to do with my own ideas. I returned to the old logistics project. At first, it was terrible. My software crashed constantly. The prediction model produced nonsense. One night, after 6 straight hours of work, I threw my notebook onto the floor. This is ridiculous. I almost stopped. Then I remembered Elena's voice from years ago. I know it sounds crazy. Back then, I had told her crazy ideas were worth testing. So I picked up the notebook. Fine, I whispered. Let's test it. I began again. During the day, I took temporary consulting work to pay my bills. At night, I coded. For the first time in years, every decision belonged to me. There was no CEO giving instructions. No investor demanding results. No husband trying to keep a marriage alive. Just me. And slowly, something began to change. My model started working. It could predict when small manufacturers would need replacement equipment before they placed orders. The accuracy wasn't perfect, but it was good enough to matter. I called the project North Star. I had no investors, no office, no employees, just an old laptop and a stubborn belief that I hadn't wasted all those years. Meanwhile, Elena kept calling. At first, I ignored her. Then one evening, she left a voicemail. Her voice sounded different. Adrian, please call me back. I listened to it twice. There was no anger, only uncertainty. I still didn't call. A few days later, another message arrived. Marcus says the project needs more development. I think we should discuss your involvement. I almost smiled. There it was. Even now, she wasn't asking how I was. She was talking about the project. I deleted the message. Then I went back to work. The following Monday, my temporary client introduced me to someone who would change the direction of my life. Her name was Claire Bennett. She was a systems architect who had left a major technology company after becoming tired of building products nobody actually needed. We met in a coffee shop. She listened to my explanation of North Star without interrupting. When I finished, she asked one question. Why aren't you selling this? I laughed. Because I'm not sure it's good enough. She shook her head. You're waiting for permission. The words hit harder than she knew. I looked down at my coffee. Claire leaned back. People who build useful things always think they're unfinished. That's not a reason to hide them. For the first time, someone saw my uncertainty without using it against me. I hired her 3 days later. Not because she was the best engineer I had ever met. Because she was the first person in years who asked what I wanted instead of telling me what I should want. 6 months after I left Elena, Northstar had become a real company. A tiny one. Claire and I worked out of a rented room above a printing shop. Our office had 2 desks, 1 broken air conditioner, and a kettle that took 10 minutes to boil. But I loved it. Every morning, I unlocked the door myself. Every evening, I turned off the lights myself. There was something deeply satisfying about building a life that didn't depend on somebody else's approval. Then our first major client signed. It was a regional manufacturing group with 12 facilities. Their operations director tested Northstar for 3 months. The results surprised everyone. Emergency equipment orders dropped by nearly a third. Downtime decreased. Inventory costs fell. The director called me personally. "Mr. Cole, whatever you're doing, keep doing it." I sat in that tiny office after the call ended. Claire smiled. "You realize you just made money from something you almost abandoned?" I laughed. "I realize I should have started sooner." She looked at me carefully. "Maybe you couldn't have." I understood what she meant. Some dreams didn't die because they were impossible. They died because you kept sacrificing them for people you loved. Meanwhile, Elena's world was beginning to crack. I didn't know that yet. I only found out months later. At the time, she sent me one message. "We need to talk about Northstar." I didn't respond. Then she sent another. "Marcus has concerns about the technology." That caught my attention. Not because I cared what Marcus thought. Because Northstar wasn't supposed to be in Veilcrest's hands. I called Claire. "Check our old files." "Why?" "See whether anyone accessed the original project." She was silent for a moment. Then I heard keyboard clicks. "Adrian." "What?" "You need to come here." I drove to the office. Claire had opened the original server records. Someone from Veilcrest had accessed my old technical files. Several times. But the access wasn't from Elena's account. It was Marcus. And the dates were after I had left. I felt something cold settle in my chest. "He copied the architecture," Claire said. "Can he prove it?" "He doesn't have the full source code. But he has enough to imitate the concept." I leaned against the desk. That explained Elena's sudden messages. Northstar wasn't just an idea anymore. It was becoming valuable. And Marcus wanted it. For the first time since leaving, I considered calling Elena. Not because I wanted her back. Because I wanted to know whether she had known. Then another file appeared on Claire's screen. A confidential Veilcrest proposal. Marcus had submitted a new product to the board. Its internal name was Atlas. Its description was almost identical to Northstar. I stared at the screen. Claire whispered, "He stole your concept." I shook my head. Not just the concept. I pointed to one paragraph. That paragraph described a prediction method I had personally invented 3 years earlier. Something I had never published. Something only 3 people had ever seen. Me, Elena, and Marcus. My chest tightened. I didn't feel angry. Not yet. I felt something worse. Disappointment. Because there was only one question left. Had Elena given him my work knowingly? That night, I sat alone in the office long after Claire left. I opened my old wedding photographs on my phone. There was one from our first year together. Elena was holding a paper cup of coffee. I was laughing at something outside the frame. We looked impossibly happy. I remembered the promise she had made that night. "If we ever become successful," she had said, "I don't want us to become strangers." I closed the photograph. Success hadn't made us strangers. We had made ourselves strangers. Then my phone rang. It was Elena. This time, I answered. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, she said, "Adrian." "Yes." Her voice trembled slightly. "Did you build Northstar?" I looked through the office window at the city lights. "Yes." A long silence followed. Then Elena whispered, "Why didn't you tell me?" I almost laughed. Because suddenly, after everything, she was asking the wrong question. I leaned back in my chair. "Because you stopped being the person I wanted to tell." She didn't respond. And for the first time since I had left, I heard Elena crying. I closed my eyes. But I didn't take back what I had said. Elena didn't call again that night. For the next 3 days, I heard nothing from her. I expected relief. Instead, I found myself thinking about that final silence. I had heard Elena cry only a handful of times in our marriage. The first time was when her father died. The second was when Veilcrest nearly collapsed. And the third had been during our phone call. I hated that some part of me still cared. But caring about someone didn't mean I had to return to them. Claire noticed my distraction. You're thinking about her. I looked up from my laptop. No. She raised an eyebrow. That's a terrible lie. I sighed. She asked why I didn't tell her about North Star. And what did you say? That she stopped being the person I wanted to tell. Claire was quiet. Then she said, was it true? I looked at the screen. Yes. Then stop punishing yourself for telling the truth. I nodded. That afternoon, North Star received its first serious investment offer. A venture fund wanted 30% of the company. The amount was enough to transform everything. A real office. A proper engineering team. International expansion. I was tempted, but I remembered how easily control had disappeared from my hands at Vailcrest. So I declined. Instead, Claire and I built slowly. We hired carefully. We chose clients who cared about the technology instead of publicity. Within another 4 months, North Star was being used by companies in 3 states. Then the article appeared. Former Vailcrest operations director builds breakthrough predictive platform. I hadn't spoken to the journalist. Apparently, one of our clients had. The article included my name, and beneath it was a photograph. Within hours, my inbox exploded. Investors, executives, recruiters, journalists, people I hadn't heard from in years. Then I received a message from an old Vailcrest employee. Congratulations, Adrian. We always knew you were the one holding everything together. I stared at that sentence for a long time. Because 3 years ago, those same people had watched me leave without asking why. Success had a strange way of making invisible people visible. That evening, Claire brought me coffee. You're trending. I don't know whether to laugh or be worried. Both are appropriate. I smiled. Then my phone rang. Elena. I answered. Hello. Adrian. I saw the article. I assumed you would. You built all of this after leaving. Yes. Why didn't you ever tell me? I closed my eyes. Because every time I imagined telling you something, I imagined having to defend it. Silence. Then she said, I never wanted you to feel that way. You didn't have to want it. What does that mean? It means you didn't have to intend to hurt me for me to be hurt. She didn't answer. After a moment, she said, I need to see you. I almost refused. But there were still unanswered questions about Marcus. So I agreed. We met at a quiet restaurant neither of us had visited before. Elena arrived early. When I walked in, she stood. For a moment, I barely recognized her. Not because she looked different. Because she looked tired. The woman who used to walk into boardrooms like she owned the air now looked as if she hadn't slept properly in months. You look well, she said. I am. She nodded. We sat. For several minutes, neither of us touched the menu. Finally, Elena said, I didn't know Marcus copied your work. I watched her carefully. Do you believe I believe that? She flinched. I should have known. Yes. I should have asked you before using your research. Yes. And I shouldn't have asked you to leave the company. I said nothing. Her eyes filled. I thought you were unhappy. I was. Because of Marcus? Because of you. That hurt her. I could see it. But I didn't soften the truth. You stopped treating me like your husband. I continued. You started treating me like an employee who had become inconvenient. I was under pressure. So was I. She looked down. I thought you would always come back. I know. That was arrogant. It was. She gave a small, broken laugh. Then she asked the question I had expected from the beginning. Are you still wearing your ring? I looked at my hand. No. Her lips trembled. Do you hate me? I shook my head. No. Something in her expression collapsed. Then why does this feel worse? I didn't answer immediately. Because I finally understood the truth. Hatred would have meant she still occupied too much of my heart. Indifference would have been easier. But what I felt was something quieter. Grief. I had loved the woman she was before we lost each other. I just didn't love the life we had become. Before we left the restaurant, Elena placed an envelope on the table. I found this in my father's old files, she said. I frowned. What is it? Open it. Inside was a copy of an agreement from the earliest days of Vailcrest. My signature was on the final page. I read the document twice. Then I looked at her. This says I retained ownership of all original technology one developed independently. Yes. Why are you giving me this? Because it's yours. I stared at her. You could have kept it. I've kept too many things that weren't mine. That was the first thing Elena had said that made me believe she might actually understand. We parted without touching. I walked back to my apartment alone. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was running away from her. I was simply walking forward. The next morning, Marcus made his move. Veilcrest announced Atlas to the public. The product launch was scheduled for the following month. But there was a problem. Atlas didn't work. It looked impressive in presentations, but real-world testing showed major errors. Their system predicted demand incorrectly in several markets. A few clients withdrew. Then one major customer canceled its contract. Veilcrest's stock began falling. Marcus blamed the engineering team. The engineering team blamed Marcus. And Elena found herself in the middle. 2 days later, she called me. Adrian, I need your help. I was silent. I know I have no right to ask. No, you don't. I understand. Then why are you asking? Because people could lose their jobs. That stopped me. Whatever had happened between Elena and me, I didn't want innocent employees punished for Marcus's decisions. I'll review the system, I said. Nothing more. She agreed. Claire and I examined Atlas. Within 48 hours, we found the problem. Marcus had copied the visible architecture of Northstar, but misunderstood the foundation. Northstar didn't simply predict purchasing behavior. It learned how different supply chains reacted to disruptions. Marcus had removed the adaptive layer because he thought it made the system too complicated. That one decision had destroyed the model. Claire stared at the results. He didn't steal your invention. He stole the shell and destroyed it. I nodded. Then we discovered something worse. Marcus had submitted internal documents claiming he had created the technology himself. He hadn't merely copied my work. He had falsified its ownership. Elena confronted him. The meeting became ugly. Marcus accused her of choosing me over the company. She responded calmly. No, I'm choosing the truth over you. That sentence ended their partnership. An internal investigation began. Marcus resigned before the board could formally remove him. But the damage remained. Veilcrest's reputation suffered. Elena testified before the board and admitted that she had failed to verify the origins of Atlas. She didn't protect herself. She didn't blame me. For the first time, she accepted responsibility. I learned about it through the news. I expected to feel satisfaction. Instead, I felt tired. That evening, Elena sent me one final message. I know I cannot repair what I broke, but thank you for helping the employees. I will never forget it. I typed a response. Take care of yourself. Then I stopped. I added, and Elena, don't rebuild your life around trying to get me back. She replied almost immediately. What should I rebuild it around? I stared at the screen. Then I wrote, something that belongs to you. I put down my phone. A few weeks later, Northstar signed its largest contract yet. The company moved into a real office. We hired 23 people. Claire became my chief operating officer. And one evening, after everyone had gone home, she stood beside me near the window. You know, she said, you don't look like someone who just escaped a marriage anymore. What do I look like? She smiled. Someone who finally arrived somewhere. I looked at the office around us. For the first time, I understood what she meant. I hadn't built Northstar to make Elena regret losing me. I had built it because there was a part of me I had abandoned long before I left her. And now I had finally gone back for it. A year after I left Elena, Northstar moved into a glass building overlooking the river. It was still strange to see our name on the entrance. Not because I had become rich. I hadn't. We were successful, but I still checked expenses myself and argued with suppliers over unnecessary fees. What felt strange was seeing employees arrive every morning because of something I had created. People trusted my decisions now. I had spent years believing my value came from helping someone else succeed. Now I was learning that I could stand on my own. Then Elena appeared at our office. I was walking out of a meeting when I saw her waiting near reception. She wore a dark suit, her hair tied back, a folder against her chest. The receptionist looked nervous. I stopped. Elena looked at me. Can we talk? I glanced at my watch. I have 15 minutes. She nodded. We went into a small conference room. She placed the folder on the table. Veilcrest has decided to shut down Atlas. That makes sense. We're also restructuring the division Marcus created. I said nothing. She looked at me. I wanted you to hear it from me. Why? Because you deserve to. That answer surprised me. A year earlier, Elena would have made the decision and expected me to accept it. Now she was asking permission to enter a conversation. I noticed the difference. So what happens now? I asked. I stay as CEO. That must be difficult. It is. She gave a faint smile. I thought being a CEO meant knowing what to do. And now I think it means knowing when you don't. I smiled despite myself. For a moment, we were almost the old couple again. Then she said something that changed the mood. I've been going to therapy. I looked at her. I didn't know. You weren't supposed to. There was no bitterness in her voice. I realized something, she continued. I kept telling myself I pushed you away because I was protecting Veilcrest. But that's not the truth. What is? I was afraid. Of what? That if I admitted how much I depended on you, people would think I wasn't strong enough to lead. I looked down. That explained more than any apology could. You didn't have to be strong all the time, I said. I know that now. She swallowed. I also know that I made you feel invisible because I was afraid of becoming dependent on you. I didn't answer. The silence between us was no longer hostile. It was simply honest. Elena stood. I won't ask you to come back. Good. She smiled sadly. You really haven't changed that part. I have. How? I used to say yes because I was afraid you'd leave. She looked at me. And now? Now I can say no without being afraid. Her eyes became wet. She nodded. That may be the healthiest thing you've ever said to me. After she left, I remained in the conference room for several minutes. Then Claire entered. She looked at the closed door. Her? Yes. Did she ask you back? No. Claire smiled. Then maybe she's finally learning. I laughed. But that evening, I received an unexpected invitation. Veilcrest was hosting a technology summit. They wanted Northstar as a keynote partner. I almost refused. Then I realized something. I had spent a year avoiding Elena's world. Maybe I didn't need to avoid it anymore. Maybe I could walk into that world without belonging to it. So I accepted. The day of the summit, hundreds of executives filled the auditorium. Elena stood backstage. I stood on the opposite side. When my name was announced, I walked onto the stage. The applause was loud. I looked into the crowd. Elena was sitting in the front row. For one brief second, I remembered our first business presentation. Back then, I had stood behind her, holding the notes while she spoke. Now she was sitting in the audience while I spoke. It wasn't revenge. It was simply the natural distance created by time. After my presentation, several executives approached me. One asked about international expansion. Another wanted to invest. A third offered a partnership. But one person approached me quietly. An older woman named Miriam Cole. My mother. I hadn't seen her in months. She hugged me before saying anything. I saw you on stage. I smiled. You came. Of course I came. She held my shoulders. Your father would have been proud. That sentence almost broke me. My father had died before Northstar existed. He had always told me that I was too willing to stand behind other people. Don't spend your whole life being someone's support beam, he used to say. I had thought he was talking about work. He had been talking about everything. After the summit, my mother invited me to dinner. Elena was there too. I hadn't expected it. I considered leaving. But my mother took my hand. Please. So I stayed. Dinner was quiet at first. Then my mother looked between us. I don't know what happened between you two, she said. And I don't need to. Elena lowered her eyes. My mother continued. But I know both of you. And I know neither of you is evil. I smiled faintly. No, we're just very good at hurting each other. Elena looked at me. That was mostly me. My mother sighed. Then don't waste the lesson. We ate in silence. After dinner, Elena offered to walk me outside. We stood beneath the streetlights. You've become different, she said. I had to. I know. She looked toward the road. Are you happy? The question was simple. My answer was too. Yes. She closed her eyes briefly. I'm glad. I studied her. You mean that? Yes. Why? Because if you weren't happy, I'd always wonder whether leaving was the right thing. I shook my head. You didn't leave me. She looked at me. I made you leave. No. I paused. I left when I realized staying was costing me myself. Her eyes filled. That hurts. I know. But I understand. That was the closest thing to closure we had ever had. I thought that was the end. It wasn't. 2 weeks later, Northstar received an acquisition offer. The buyer was a massive international technology company. The offer was enough to make every investor I had ever met nervous with excitement. Claire wanted me to consider it. You'd never have to worry about money again. I stared at the proposal. That's not the question. What is? Would I still own my life? She smiled. That is definitely the question. We negotiated for weeks. Finally, we accepted a partial acquisition. I retained control. The company expanded internationally. Our team grew. And for the first time, I could afford to choose work because I loved it rather than because I needed to survive. But success brought one unexpected consequence. Elena became quieter. She stopped messaging me, stopped attending events where North Star appeared, stopped asking mutual friends about me. At first, I thought she had moved on. Then I learned the truth. She was planning to resign as CEO. I called her. Why? I don't want to spend the rest of my life trying to repair an image. That isn't why you should resign. I know. Then why? She took a long breath. Because I've spent 10 years building something I thought I couldn't live without. And now I want to find out who I am without it. I smiled. That sounds familiar. She laughed softly. Yes. There was a long pause. Then she asked, would you ever forgive me? I answered honestly. I already have. Her breath caught. But forgiveness isn't the same as returning. I know. I can't give you our marriage back. I know. I don't even know whether I want the old marriage back. She was silent. Then she said, neither do I. For the first time, there was no sadness in the silence. Only acceptance. We had both finally stopped trying to resurrect something that had already ended. What we didn't know was that our final encounter was still ahead of us. And this time, it wouldn't happen because Elena came looking for me. It would happen because I would return to the place where everything had begun. The place where everything had begun was not Veilcrest's headquarters. It was a tiny apartment with a broken heater and a kitchen table that had been too small for two people. I hadn't been there in years. The building was being renovated, and my mother had somehow found the landlord's contact information. She called me one Sunday morning. You should go. Why? Because some things should be seen one last time. I knew exactly what she meant. So I went. The apartment was empty. Dust covered the windowsills. The old kitchen cabinets were gone. But the wall where Elena had once pinned her first business plan was still there. I stood in front of it. I could almost hear her voice. I know it sounds crazy. I smiled. Then I heard footsteps behind me. I turned. Elena stood in the doorway. For a moment, neither of us spoke. You knew I was here? I asked. No. She held up an envelope. The landlord called me too. We both laughed. It was strange. After everything, we were standing in the same room again. But it didn't hurt the way I expected. Elena walked toward the old kitchen. I remember this place. So do I. You used to complain about the heater. It was objectively terrible. You said it built character. I lied. She laughed. The sound brought back a memory so vivid that for a second, I could see us sitting on the floor eating noodles. Then the memory passed. Elena looked at me. I've been thinking about that night. What night? The night you left. I said nothing. I kept wondering why you didn't fight. I looked at the empty room. Because I had been fighting for years. She lowered her eyes. I know. No, Elena. I don't think you do. She waited. I continued. I fought every time I defended you to people who thought you were too ambitious. I fought when investors doubted you. I fought when the company was struggling. I fought when you were too busy to come home. I fought when Marcus became more important to you than I was. She closed her eyes. And eventually, I said, I realized I wasn't fighting for our marriage anymore. She whispered, what were you fighting for? The memory of it. That hurt. But she didn't argue. Instead, she said, I wish I had realized sooner. So do I. She looked at me. Did you ever regret leaving? I thought carefully. Yes. Her expression changed. When? The first night. She looked surprised. I regretted hurting you. I regretted losing the person I thought you were. I regretted that we couldn't become what we promised. And now I understand that regret doesn't mean the decision was wrong. She nodded slowly. Then she opened the envelope. Inside was my old notebook. The original North Star notebook. I stared at it. Where did you get that? I found it in the company archive. You kept it. I didn't know why. She handed it to me. I think I do now. I took it. The pages were worn. Some corners were folded. There were coffee stains from nights I barely remembered. I turned to the final page. A sentence was written there. Build something that helps people before you build something that impresses them. I had forgotten writing it. Elena read it over my shoulder. That sounds like you. It sounds like the person I wanted to be. She smiled. You became him. I looked at her. And you? She took a breath. I resigned. I already knew. But hearing her say it made it real. What will you do? I don't know. That's okay. She smiled. You once told me uncertainty isn't failure. I was smarter when I was younger. You were kinder. I laughed. For a moment, we stood in silence. Then Elena asked the question I had secretly expected. Is there someone else? I looked at her. Why? Because you seem happy. I am. That doesn't answer the question. I hesitated. Then I thought of Claire. Her patience, her honesty, the way she never asked me to become smaller so she could feel bigger. Yes, I said. Elena nodded. She didn't ask for details. She simply smiled. I'm glad. This time, I believed her. Claire and I had never officially called our relationship anything. It had grown slowly. After late nights became dinners. Dinners became weekends. Weekends became mornings when she stayed over and argued with me about coffee. She never rushed me. Never compared herself to Elena. Never demanded proof that I had moved on. She simply gave me room to become myself. One evening, months after leaving the old apartment, Claire and I stood on the balcony of my new home. She held 2 cups of tea. You're thinking too loudly. I laughed. Can people do that? You do. She handed me a cup. I was thinking about the past. I know. You're not jealous? Of your past? Yes. She shook her head. Adrian, I didn't fall in love with you because you had no history. I looked at her. I fell in love with you because you survived it. I didn't know what to say, so I reached for her hand. For the first time in my life, love didn't feel like something I had to earn. It felt like somewhere I could rest. Meanwhile, Elena was starting over. She rented a small office and began advising young founders. She refused executive positions. She stopped attending celebrity business events. She told people she wanted to work with companies that were still small enough to remember why they existed. I heard about her occasionally, never through her directly, through articles, mutual friends, industry news. And each time, I felt something unexpected. Pride. Not romantic love. Not longing. Pride. She had finally begun rebuilding herself too. Then came the final confrontation. Not between Elena and me. Between Elena and the board of Veilcrest. The internal investigation into Atlas had uncovered more than Marcus's misconduct. Several executives had ignored warning signs because they wanted fast growth. Elena testified and accepted responsibility for the culture she had allowed to develop. She could have blamed Marcus. Instead, she admitted she had created an environment where challenging her decisions had become dangerous. The board removed several executives. Elena voluntarily surrendered part of her compensation. Then she stepped away from the company completely. When I heard, I called her. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. You could have protected yourself. I protected myself for years. She paused. Maybe that's why I lost you. I didn't know how to respond. She continued. I used to think losing you was the worst thing that ever happened to me. I waited. Now I think it was the most painful thing that ever taught me something. I smiled. That sounds like progress. It is. We were silent. Then she said, I want to ask you something, and you don't have to answer. Okay. If I had treated you differently, would you have stayed? I closed my eyes. That was the question we had both avoided. Yes. She exhaled softly. But you didn't. No. And I can't change that. No. She whispered, I know. There was no anger. No accusation. Just 2 people finally looking directly at the life they had lost. I said, Elena, I don't hate you. I know. I don't even blame you anymore. I know. But I can't go back. Her voice broke. I know. That was the final answer. Not dramatic. Not cruel. Just true. A few months later, Claire and I traveled to a coastal town to open North Star's first community technology center. The goal wasn't profit. We wanted small businesses to access forecasting tools they could never afford before. As I stood in the new building, watching young entrepreneurs test the software, I realized something. The boy who had once sat beside Elena on a broken couch had spent years believing his greatest achievement was helping her build a company. He had been wrong. His greatest achievement was learning that his own dreams deserved a place at the table too. That night, Claire found me standing outside. You're smiling. I was remembering. Good memories? I looked at her. Now they are. She took my hand. And for the first time, I didn't look backward. 3 years after I changed my status to single, I received a wedding invitation. It wasn't mine. It was Elena's. I stared at the envelope for almost a minute before opening it. Inside was a simple card. Elena Vale requests the pleasure of your company at the opening of the Vale Foundation. Not a wedding. Not another marriage. Just a foundation bearing the name of her family. I smiled. For a moment, I wondered why she had sent it to me. Then I understood. It wasn't an invitation back into her life. It was an invitation to witness the life she had built after losing mine. I went. The foundation supported young entrepreneurs who couldn't afford expensive education or startup capital. When I arrived, Elena was standing near the entrance. She looked different. Not younger. Not more glamorous. Just lighter. "Thank you for coming," she said. "I wouldn't miss it." She smiled. "That's the nicest thing you've said to me in years. You've earned it." We walked inside. On the walls were photographs of young founders, engineers, artists, and small business owners. There were no photographs of Elena receiving awards. No giant portraits. No reminders of her old status. I looked around. "You built this for them?" "Yes." "Why?" She smiled. "Because I spent years thinking success meant having more." She paused. "Now I think it means leaving something useful behind." I nodded. "I understand." A young woman approached us. "Ms. Vale, they're ready for you." Elena looked at me. "Stay." "I will." She walked onto the stage. As she spoke, I watched the audience. She wasn't performing. She was sharing. That difference mattered. Afterward, we stood outside beneath a row of trees. "I heard North Star is opening in Europe," she said. "We are." "Congratulations." "Thank you." "Claire is going with you?" "Yes." She smiled. "She seems good for you." "She is." There was no jealousy in her voice. Only peace. Then Elena reached into her bag and handed me a small box. I frowned. "What is this?" "Open it later." I took it. That evening, I opened the box at home. Inside was my old wedding ring. The one I had left on the dresser the night I walked away. I sat quietly. There was a note. "You left this because you no longer wanted to belong to the life we had." I kept it because I wasn't ready to accept that the life was over. Now I am. I turned the ring over. On the inside was the date of our wedding. I remembered that day. The vows. The laughter. The promises. I also remembered the status I had changed years later. Single. At the time, people thought it was a public declaration. It wasn't. It was the first honest thing I had done for myself in years. I placed the ring inside the box. I didn't throw it away. I didn't put it back on. I simply kept it. Some memories don't need to be destroyed to be left behind. The next morning, I called Elena. "Thank you." "You got it." "Yes." "How do you feel?" I looked out at the sunrise. "Peaceful." She laughed softly. "Good." Then she said, "Adrian?" "Yes." "I hope you never change your status for someone else again." I smiled. "I won't." She hung up. And that was the last personal conversation we ever had. Not because we hated each other. Because we no longer needed each other to complete the story. Years later, people sometimes asked me how North Star became successful. They wanted to know about the algorithm, the investors, the acquisition, the expansion. I always gave them the technical answer. But the real answer was much simpler. I stopped living someone else's life. I stopped measuring my worth by how useful I was to another person. I stopped confusing loyalty with self-abandonment. And I learned that walking away doesn't always mean you stopped loving someone. Sometimes it means you finally learn to love yourself enough to stop disappearing. Claire and I eventually married. Our wedding was small. No investors. No reporters. No executives. Just family, close friends, and a garden filled with white flowers. Before the ceremony, Claire found me standing alone. Nervous. A little. "Why?" I smiled. "Because I know marriage is serious." She stepped closer. And I don't want to promise I'll never change." She laughed. "Good. I want to promise that when we change, we'll tell each other." She took my hand. "And when we're afraid, we talk. And when we're hurt, we don't punish each other with silence." I looked at her. "And when one of us starts losing ourselves?" She squeezed my hand. "We remind each other who we are." That was the promise I had wanted all along. Not perfection. Not forever without pain. Just two people willing to remain honest when love became difficult. Years passed. North Star continued growing. The foundation Elena created helped thousands of young people start businesses. Occasionally, our organizations collaborated. We never hid our history. We simply didn't live inside it anymore. One afternoon, I received a letter from a young entrepreneur who had attended one of our programs. She wrote, "I thought successful people were born confident. Then I met you and realized confidence can be built after losing everything." I read the letter twice. Then I looked through the office window. My employees were laughing around a conference table. Claire was arguing with our finance director about a budget. Someone had left coffee beside my laptop. The company was alive. Messy. Imperfect. Mine. I thought about that night years ago when Elena had seen my status change. Since when? Back then, she thought the answer was a date. She thought I had suddenly decided to become single. But the truth was more complicated. I had been becoming single long before I changed that status. I became single every time I stopped telling her what hurt because I was afraid of losing her. I became single every time I watched her choose everyone else and convinced myself it didn't matter. I became single the night I realized I was fighting for a marriage that existed mostly in my memories. The status simply made the truth visible. And maybe that was why Elena had asked, since when? Because she hadn't noticed when I had stopped belonging to her. Neither had I, until I finally did. I don't hate Elena. I don't wish her failure. I don't want revenge. She was once the person I loved most in the world. And because she was, what happened between us mattered. It taught me what loyalty should be, what boundaries should be, what love should never require. Most importantly, it taught me that forgiveness doesn't mean reopening a door. Sometimes forgiveness means closing it without anger, then turning around and discovering another road. A road that leads somewhere you never expected to go. A few months ago, Claire and I visited the first North Star Community Center. A group of young founders were waiting for us. One nervous teenager approached me. "Sir, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "How did you know when it was time to leave?" I looked at him. Then I thought about a broken heater, a tiny apartment, a woman with a crazy business plan, a wedding ring on a dresser, a suitcase in my hand, and a status changed on a screen. I smiled. "You don't leave because you stopped caring." I told him. "You leave when staying requires you to stop caring about yourself." He nodded slowly. I looked at Claire. She was smiling at me, and I realized that the greatest thing I had gained wasn't North Star. It wasn't money. It wasn't success. It wasn't even a new relationship. It was the ability to wake up every morning and know that my life belonged to me. Once, I thought losing Elena meant losing my future. Now I understand. She was part of my past. A painful part. A meaningful part. But only a part. My life didn't end when she stopped choosing me. It began when I finally chose myself. And if there is one thing I would tell the man I was that night, standing beside a suitcase with his wedding ring on the dresser, it would be this. You are not walking away from love. You are walking toward yourself. And sometimes, that is the bravest love story of all.